first, I'd like to welcome all of you from the Health Law section. I am the chair for this year, and I'm very excited that we have Stefan here, who has been with the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration, which, as you all know, is the agency that regulates all our healthcare facilities here in Florida, from hospitals to nursing homes to home health agencies. And Stefan has actually been in two of the top posts, both as general counsel and then as chief of staff. And in between, had a private practice where he really established himself as one of the most prominent healthcare attorneys in Florida. So I'm very excited and honored that you're joining us here today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So tell us about how you started off and found your way to where you are now.
It's been a very circuitous route.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined the bar in 2011 after coming back from law school out of state. And I was an assistant state attorney for a couple of years in Leon County and Gadsden County. And I loved that. I had a tremendous amount of experience in a role like that, just kind of getting thrown in
Mm-hmm.
to trial work. I remember you walk in, they hand you a stack of files and they say, all right, these are your cases, go try them. Right. So you kind of learn trial by fire with jury trials and you start to get into in the upper level cases, talking to medical examiners, kind of going through the anatomy of the body, of the gunshot wound and all these things like that. So that was kind of my first experience with sort of starting to get into, I'll call it healthcare, but really kind of like how the human body interacts with a gunshot wound, talking to physicians about the
Mm-hmm.
impacts of injury and things like that. From there, after a couple of years, I went into medical malpractice defense work. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I started sort of getting more into what I would characterize sort of like traditional health law.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued doing that litigation work. And that's where you really started getting into medical expert testimony and really sort of digging into what it's like to represent physicians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did for years. And it was really great. Tried a number of cases. But ultimately for me, I think it was just kind of a financial decision to just kind of like roll up to a larger firm where I was doing commercial trucking litigation. And so sort of back to sort of the injury aspect of healthcare. But what I kind of missed was that feeling of purpose that I had at the state attorney's office. And so I was kind of looking around trying to figure out what to do next. And a friend of mine said, hey, there is an opening at the general counsel position at the Department of Elder Affairs. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, gosh, I don't know what that means, but sure, let's find out.
Yeah.
So I went through a round of interviews, and I was selected. And I think in talking to the agency secretary who made that decision.
And you were in the position of general counsel there as well.
I was.
Correct?
I went directly into general counsel. And I think in many ways was selected for that position because I'd had so much hands-on experience as a lawyer. And just I think the feeling was, wow, you've handled a lot of things and had a lot of responsibility. You can figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first jump into public sector sort of healthcare world.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of, it went from there.
Yeah. And so how would you say that experience working in the state government kind of prepared you then to the foray into more of a healthcare practice?
Well, I think it gave a different perspective than a lot of my colleagues that I meet sort of at section events and things
Mm-hmm.
like that may have had, a really fascinating, which I love talking to them because people will have a great experience at a law firm, and they do these compliance cases and,
Mm-hmm.
and M&A and stuff. And I have the totally different side of that. So I'm fascinated and enjoy talking to people about that side.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the public sector side was was totally different because one, and you may sense this theme, is I enjoyed, again, that sort of feeling like I'm representing my agency. And there's a lot of dynamics there that may be sort of rippling throughout a regulated body or something like that. It's not just a case, but it's a case about a rule that impacts an entire industry. And I loved that side of it. And then I think just the opportunity to work on those teams with lots of lawyers or lawyers that have been in the public sector space for a long time. It was easy to find a mentor, someone that really knew what they were talking about, someone that was available. And so that was great. I felt like whenever I went looking for that, someone was always available. Now, you got to be careful because sometimes that turns into a 2-hour conversation. But people were there to be helpful. And it was great as a young lawyer to have that opportunity. Or even as general counsel stepping into my role, there were things about state government I just didn't know anything about. And so I had plenty of people that were there to help sort of educate me on just the side, how a state agency works, and what are all the pieces that go together to make it happen outside of just sort of the legal side of it.
Yeah. So as someone who's had the opportunity to do both, be in the public sector and the private sector, how would you kind of compare the two and guide our section membership in terms of making a decision whether to do the public sector or the private sector and how they're different?
Well, I think that it is a tremendous opportunity for a young lawyer. And in no small part because of what I just said, I think there's a lot of very good lawyers that have been with the state for a long time. They've made a career doing it. And if someone's been trying rule challenges or has been involved in certain, nursing home regulatory litigation for 20 years, they're amazing to learn from. And so I think opportunities like that don't always present themselves in private practice,
right?
In my experience. But I found it was readily available in the public sector. And in the same vein, it was really easy to get a lot of significant responsibility very quickly. It's easy to get added a second chair on a big case, or after a couple of years, suddenly you're the one trying the big cases. And so that responsibility rises very quickly, especially for people that are interested and want to have that. And so it can sort of jumpstart your career and give you very quick experience to either stay or go to another agency in a more administrative role, or you can take those skills and go to private practice and sort of monetize it and add yourself to a team somewhere.
Which is somewhat how the path you took.
It is, right.
You were general counsel and then in private practice. And then, so tell us about how, as chief of staff, you quickly established yourself really as an expert. Tell us a little more about that path.
Well, I don't think I would have the success that I had as chief of staff if I hadn't been general counsel. And I say that because after 3 years as agency's general counsel, I knew the agency pretty well. So it wasn't like I came in and I was still trying to figure out, where the men's room was. I had a pretty good sense of not only the team, people knew me and I knew them, but I also knew I had a good handle on health facility regulation in Florida and the pieces and parts that sort of led to that, because I had been involved in litigating some of those rules and writing some of those rules and advising on some of the legislation that passed. So, for example, when Certificate of Need was repealed in 2018, I was working with the team responsible for regulating hospitals and really sort of taking the hands-on legal advisor role to that. So I knew those hospital regulations pretty well and the direction that we were supposed to go in. So when I got to the agency, I had that full background. And so I was able to really jump in and not spend that time learning the agency.
Right.
So that was a huge benefit.
You had already seen the things in the beginning stages. And so that's probably pretty neat to be able to kind of see it through.
Oh, yeah.
Through a process of, coming to fruition and actually unwinding in a way.
Which is funny you say that, because when I was advising on the certificate of need repeal, actually one of the things that I was involved in when I left was a recent rule that was still implementing that certificate of need repeal. And I think it's still ongoing right now. So it felt like it came full circle just years and years later.
Yeah. It took time.
It did. It took a very long time, but there's nothing like being in that position. I mean, it's effectively the agency's number two. So you have the agency head who's appointed by the governor, and then you have the chief of staff under them, and you're kind of the general for the agency, and responsible for making sure everything goes in the direction it's supposed to go in, keeping
which
the
is
trains
really
running.
Quite remarkable when you think about, the agency, you're talking about a budget of about $40 billion. So that's a considerable level of responsibility.
It's the largest budget entity in the state of Florida, with state and federal funding all combined in the Medicaid program.
Yeah, remarkable. Very neat. So what would you say is a common mistake that you see younger attorneys making? So
this is one I've thought a little bit about, and I think I would say two things. One is when I was I'll reflect sort of on our theme of public versus private. In private practice, I think a young lawyer working on an assignment or with an older lawyer, not asking questions. You come in, you think you get it, and you start to go down the path and you go, oh my gosh, there's a lot more to this than I thought. And just don't be afraid to go.
I think that's so true, because they don't want to look stupid and they feel like everybody else knows what's going on. And it's so important to realize that health law is complex. It's complex, and it's normal to have questions, right?
Always, all of us.
And it's easy to go down a very bad road for your client if you don't get it right. So it's important to ask if you're not comfortable with it. Yes, that's very good advice.
So that was one that I thought was even as an older lawyer where I had younger attorneys working with me, I felt like it was helpful to get those questions, because it can even help me sort of narrow down. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe let's narrow down the issue a little bit more, or maybe I do need to call the client and make sure, we do have all the facts that we need. And so sometimes those questions can kind of help prompt, the issue to head in the right direction. On the other side of things, and I guess this applies to everything, but it goes back to my days as a litigator, is just be nice to everybody, especially opposing counsel. I dealt with some very difficult litigators, and that was one of the reasons I left litigation. Is because I like to cooperate and coordinate, and I don't have a combative personality. And but I felt like you could always be sort of kind and work towards resolution in an amicable way, and no one will ever fault you for that.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think it's easy to sink to the other side's level, right? Especially when you're dealing with someone who isn't professional, to kind of fall in the trap of giving it back.
Right. Oh, it's very easy. Take a deep breath and stop for a minute. And especially, you get a nasty letter or something, and just calm down. You can work through this and be professional about it.
That's great advice. So what advice would you give like a young professional thinking about health law, or thinking about maybe not health law, making that decision?
Sure. Well, I think the advice that I would give is seize the opportunity. I think reflecting on my career, the path that I've sort of wound to get where I am was in no small part because when an opportunity arose, I jumped on it. Mm-hmm. And there were other opportunities that could have been good, but after a lot of reflection, I decided was not the direction I wanted to take. And so I always tell people to keep an eye out for the opportunity. When it arises, if it's what's right for you, seize it. Mm-hmm. But the other important part of that, I think, is don't get stuck doing something you don't want to do. And I think that opportunity is always there for anyone that's looking. And if you're doing something that you don't like, or you just want to do something different, find a way to do it. And don't let anybody tell you you can't do that. And I think I believe very strongly that my wife told me early on when we were dating that one of her favorite things about me is she felt like anything was possible. Oh, and I always kind of, I reflect on that and I try to kind of push that now that it's something that's been made aware to me is, look, anything's possible. Figure out what works for you and grab it and make it happen. Mm-hmm. And don't get sort of stuck in a box where you feel like it's not where you belong.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. I think a lot of attorneys, like you mentioned litigation, I'm the same way. Litigation, it just wasn't for me. It was a little too adversarial. And at the same time, they maybe feel like health law is so complex and it's so much to it and I can't. But once you jump in, I think that's very true. That's true in my career as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Health law sometimes feels like this ocean, right? And you look out and all you can see is a horizon and it feels limitless.
Yeah.
And you say, oh my gosh, how can I spot all the issues? Is there a compliance issue that's going to be a problem? Is there a regulatory issue that's going to be a problem? But you have a great section with great CLEs to learn and
peers to seek mentorship. Like you mentioned within the agency, that's one of the things you liked is that you could always find people to help you navigate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things we offer as a section is if you don't have it within your own employment, you have the ability through the section, hopefully, to find mentorship.
I have friends that I made in this section that when there's a health law issue that I didn't know very well or wasn't comfortable with, that I could call, phone a friend, and I can think of times right now sitting in my office, walking through an issue, and maybe sometimes a complicated issue, but with someone who was there and was part of the organization and happy to help, and they said, look, this is classic XYZ. Here's what, either look at this or here's how you should proceed. I've done that a number of times, and it's just absolutely
And I'm sure
invaluable.
you've also paid it forward, where you've been, where people have reached out to you, and you were able to help them navigate, especially where you have that incredible wealth of experience of being on the inside, right? Like, so you've navigated both on the inside track in both the general counsel and a chief of staff role. I imagine that you have a lot of insights that some of us who've been in the private practice the whole way necessarily don't have.
It's been one of the more wonderful sides of the health law section is how friendly everybody is and happy to help.
Yeah. So that kind of segues into my next question, which is, what would you say is the greatest lesson you've learned in practicing health law?
What's the greatest lesson I've learned in practicing health law? I think it's been a very humbling experience because it can get complicated. But what I have enjoyed has when I was, and I'll give you an example in private practice, we had a team, and those lawyers were around the country, but were experts in their field, and you'd be working on something and gosh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this. And you'd bring people in and being on a call where you have, 5 really good lawyers talking through a number of issues for that client, was just really impressive to
Mm-hmm.
watch. And so I think being in a position to have access to that support, being sort of confident or humble enough to ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
and then bringing people together for the client
Mm-hmm.
was just one of the best experiences I felt in private practice, when you just have really good lawyers all working to support you and your client.
Mm-hmm.
You just, wow, this is how it works.
Right.
That to me was just an incredible thing.
I do think, I feel like, again, not having, and of course health law has litigation as part of it too, but I think it's a practice area where there is a lot of camaraderie, and there are a lot of things that you, like the complexity. I have had several transactions where you really don't know the answer, and there's so many moving parts sometimes with these affiliations and mergers, and it's just it's not buyer against seller, and it's more regulatory compliance, right? Like we all want to be compliant. Let's figure out the path forward and let's all work together. Right. So I think that is very much an aspect of health law that's very enjoyable.
I think you make a good point. Is I think maybe to sort of to pin the answer to the question is what's a lesson? There's not always an answer, right? And so it's, how do you advise given the facts and the circumstances? And I think I was doing that this morning with a prospective client. Is, look, there may not be an answer, but sort of here's how you build it, right? And that's going to get you the best result that you're looking for. But if you're looking for just a sentence with a period at the end, we probably aren't going to get that. Yeah. And if someone's telling you that there is that,
they probably don't have a full set of. Sometimes that's from ignorance, unfortunately, right? Like not knowing how complex a matter is to think there is a simple answer. Yeah, definitely. So, what do you see as the future of health law?
So, healthcare is moving 1,000 miles an hour, and that's one of the exhilarating and scary things about it. So I remember I talked about sort of the ocean that felt limitless. Is it can be scary, but the technology is moving extremely fast. Of course, everybody's talking about AI, right? AI. And then of course, I think technology as it relates to the provider and recipient experience. One of the things I was really involved in at the agency was hospital at home. And I just love it. I'm passionate about it. I was deeply involved in it. I speak on it. And I kind of tell people, look, the future, it's 2025, right? If we're still sort of thinking about everything the way it operated 10 years ago, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We should be looking forward at how are these emerging technologies, how is remote patient monitoring, how are sort of creative solutions like hospital at home going to work. And so I think the future of health law is bright. I think it's filled with lots of questions, lots of sort of regulatory changes in the not too distant future. Certainly at a federal level, things are changing very quickly. I think states are recognizing some of these things and sort of playing in that field of adjusting, what it means to participate, in providing health services and whatever the myriad of regulations are. And so what I think the future of healthcare is exciting opportunity. I think a lot of stressful time for us lawyers trying to catch up to it. Something drops and everybody's writing their client alert, right, or putting it in ChatGPT or however you're handling it. And so I think it encompasses all of the changes that are happening in our world right there in the healthcare setting, and then therefore impacting us as the lawyers advising on it. So I think you just get to sort of be right there on the cutting edge of the world as it changes.
Yeah. And I think that example you mentioned with the hospital in the home is a good one, because it raises so many questions of then, everyone, AI is wonderful, but AI is scary.
Right.
And then you start thinking about, if we can automate all these things, but then if we're no longer in a facility and it's in a home, how much does it become the remote monitoring? And is that a wonderful thing? Yes. Right. Because it's a way to have 24/7 and not be reliant. And you can think compared to having a hospital facility staffed 24/7, right? But then you think the regulation you need to come alongside that and keep up in time, because the technology is amazing. How quickly it comes across, and we're just trying to catch up with our legal framework for sure.
Right. And sometimes it's, let's not get stuck in an antiquated system. I think lawyers sometimes have a tendency to get, really, no, don't do this. But some of this is moving so quickly. It's almost sort of like, all right, what's the risk tolerance? Especially like in Florida, I think our regulators are very, very forward thinking when it comes to things like this. And so, how do you set it up appropriately? So, well, the regulator thinks this is okay.
Yeah.
But then does it all line up? How do you get a level of comfort as the lawyer advising your client on it?
Yeah. And that's like when telehealth came out.
Right.
And you would look at, they tied it to reimbursement, where it would be, if it was sufficiently similar how it was provided via telehealth to how it was provided in person, then you could get reimbursed. So I thought that was kind of an interesting solution to how do we decide when it is reimbursable versus not, right? And well, to conclude, I'd like to know what is your favorite life quote?
So this, I do have a favorite life quote. I have two.
Two's okay. We'll take two.
So one of them, so total nerd moment, freshman year of of law school. I read War and Peace in a month.
Wow.
My first year. And I guess I was just a glutton for reading. And Tolstoy has always been my favorite author. So my favorite sort of overarching quote is by Leo Tolstoy, and it's there is no greatness where there is no simplicity, goodness, and truth. And in the book, he reflects on this quote, talking about how there are people who call themselves great, but indeed you can't look at it in a vacuum, because greatness really is supported by goodness, by being good, and qualities of goodness are things like simplicity and truth, and so I have always been one of those people who sort of tries to envision, or aspire to things. And so I've thought a lot about that quote, whether sort of in my own personal betterment, but also I think, when you're trying to figure something out that's complicated, or advising a client. Having been both a client and a lawyer, I have been advised by many long-winded lawyers that want to talk about precedent and standards of review. And I said, I want the simple version, cut to the chase. Give me what I need to make a decision on.
And move forward. And then get to the next decision you have to make. Yeah, because that's what you always have.
Right. So keep it simple, and that's such a facet of sort of how I try to be. The other quote is by an author, Ryan Holiday, who summarizes a quote by Marcus Aurelius, but he says the obstacle is the way. And what this quote means is that there is no self-growth or improvement or opportunity without obstacle. And so when you face an obstacle, when something's hard, when something's challenging, that's the path. because when I reflect on my career, most of the things that I've gotten really good at or had opportunity with have come out of challenges. And so when something gets hard, when it's a challenge, just lean into it. The obstacle is the way.
That's a great quote. I like that. Yeah. You have to do the hard things to grow.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's where the opportunity is in life, and that's where self-growth is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that our section membership appreciates getting your insights, and we also appreciate your service and your membership with our section as well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoyed it very much, and I've very much enjoyed the section and participating in it. And just a tremendous group of people. Everyone's helpful, and I think anybody who is interested in health law could learn a tremendous amount from this group. Anybody who's in health law and looking to expand, this is of course really the prime place to be.
The pathway to do it. Explore. See if they have interest in the things that we do, the work that we do.
Yeah,
definitely.
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.